So here's the URL, github.com/lucidlux/CoreCycler. Download it. You're gonna extract it. And you can, I mean, it's up to you. You can put it wherever you want. Here's the exe. Right click it. Send to desktop. I already have it, but here's the one I just downloaded. It's going to load up blank. You're going to reset, hit yes. I gotta fix that so that it loads the default one by default and not just empty. Yeah, here's some helpers. You got the readme the license. If you having an issue, you can read through this. This will kind of give you descriptions and whatnot. So anytime you want to reset the default settings, just hit the reset button and it'll load the default profile. Here's the test mode or the test programs. So if you want Y-Cruncher, click the bubble. You can stop the test anytime an error pops up. If you're running one thread, you can assign that thread to both processors of the core. So to give you an idea, that one thread would kind of float in between these two if you're testing core 0. Instead of, if it's disabled, that one thread will only run on one of your logical processors of the core. Skip core on error. So if core throws an error after testing all the other cores, and it does it, like moves on to the next iteration. So it'll test like core. If you got a 6-core processor, it'll go 0, 4, 2, 1, 5, 6. Say 6 throws an error, it'll restart the test 0, 4, 2, 5, 1, and then it'll go back to 0 because it'll skip core 6 since it threw an error. You can restart the test for each core. That's kind of useful for Y-Cruncher because say you're running all these tests in Y-Cruncher for each core, and it gets to core 2, and it runs BKT, then BBP, and then SFT, and then it fails. If this is disabled, and it fails here, it's going to move to the next core, so core 3 or whatever is next, and then it's going to start there and keep moving forward. If you set it to restart on each core, if core 2 throws an error here, then it moves to core 3, it's going to restart the whole test for core 3 starting at the beginning. So I like to always keep this on. It's disabled by default, but I'll get to some of the configs later. Look for WIAs, treat WIAs as errors. That's in your system event viewer. If there's a WIA error, it can pick it up and flag it as an error for that core. Beep on error if you got your audio turned on, and then speakers are turned on. Anytime a core fails the test, it'll beep. Flash on error, I think that's the icon down here, will flash. This is the threads, so you would have either 1 or 2 threads running on a core. So here's the config files. You can load a config. There's some pre-made configs here. I have a 5950X, and the best one, I made this one. This is the best one. So loading that config right there automatically applies. See, it's on Y-Cruncher, and it's using SFTV4 for 1,000 seconds. Actually, I wanted it to be 3,000. Save config. Overwrite, yes. Load config. 3000, okay. So, anyways, runtime per core. So like say you're running Prime 95, it's going to run through, like if you have under the Prime 95 section, so you have this set to all, it's going to run through the full library of FFTs. If you set this to like 6 minutes, it'll switch cores every 6 minutes, so it won't necessarily be running the full library for each core. So I like to do auto, and what that'll do is, like, when it tests each core, core 0 will be tested for the entire library if you have this set to all. All FFTs will be tested on core 0 before moving to core 1, and then when it moves to core 1, it'll test all FFTs on core 1. Let's see, core test order. I got some of these little pop-ups, by the way, these little tool tips. I need to update and correct some of them, but by default, if you have a dual CCD processor, so like the 9950 X3D or like my 5950X, when this is set to default, it automatically it uses alternate. So it'll test cores 0, 8, 1, 9, 2, 10, 3, 11, 4, 12. If you're on a 1 CCD processor, 8 cores or less, it defaults to random. So if you leave it at default, it'll automatically choose it for you. Or you can set it to sequential, so 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or you can set it to custom, and then you can type it in. So if you only want to test cores 4 and 0, you would do that. This won't test any other cores except for 4 and 0. And then right here, the max iterations, you can set this to 5 or something. It'll test core 4, 0. That's one iteration. 4, 0. That's 2 iterations. 4, 0, 3. You get it. Delay between cores. When core 0 finishes the test, it'll wait 15 seconds or whatever you set this to, and then move on to the next core. So you have this at default, but you already have core 4 stable. You can type core 4 there, or comma 8, comma 12. 4, 8, 12 will be ignored from the testing. This is the apply button. Again, this is reset. This resets everything to default. Automatic. So this is the automatic test mode. This is I think some processors aren't here. So PBO2 tuner. This is kind of what it uses, or Intel voltage control. So if your processor is compatible with either Intel voltage control or PBO2 tuner, it'll work. If not, the auto function will not work for you because it uses those to apply the curve. So this is my curve optimizer setting. This is my PBO setting. And if I set this to -12 and hit apply, it's like, that's my curve now. So go back to automatic. So what this does is you can set a default starting value. Well, default will load from your BIOS. So whatever you have set in your BIOS will be loaded as the default values. Or you can manually set it to, say, -25. And that'll do an all core -25 offset. Or if you have, Intel, you would say -150 because it uses millivolts instead of counts. If you got like a per core one you want to set, you can do like -10, -2, and you do that for every core, and it'll apply that and start the test with that. Max curve optimizer allowed. So say you're starting off at -25 and core 0 keeps failing and adjusting. So if core 0 fails a test, it'll automatically adjust by this increment. You can adjust it to 5, whatever. So if core 0 fails, it'll go to -20. If it fails again, it'll go to -15. If it fails again, it'll go to -10. This is the maximum. So if you don't want it to go, if you want to make sure it's negative even though it fails or whatever, if you want to, basically it's there to stop it from going too positive. Like I have a bad, honestly I think it's my cache, because for me it's always in cache tests that cause the failures. But I know if I have C states enabled in my BIOS, my curve is terrible. Core 4 is like +8. It fails tests up until +8. So this will cap it. This repeats core on air. So if core 0 fails, it'll restart the test. It'll adjust your curve for core 0, and then it'll restart core 0's test. And it'll keep adjusting till it passes. Then it'll move on to the next core. And that doesn't count as an iteration. One iteration, here, max iterations. One iteration would be core 0 fails, restarts, fails, restarts, fails, restarts, and then it goes to 2 passes, 3 passes, 4 passes, and then it goes, once it gets to the last core, that's one iteration. Resume test after crash. There's a PowerShell script that will log, it'll pick up the event viewer that your system crashed, and it'll read the log file for which core was being tested. It'll automatically launch the test. It'll restart the test once your computer boots back up. So I always enable this if I'm using automatic mode. Prime 95, this relates to, if you check this button, you're going to want to pay attention to these 3 tabs, because Prime 95, if you want to use automatic mode, use this tab. General, these are just general settings overall. So we're going to run a Prime 95 test. I want this tab. This is where I select, or I can do custom, and then that applies these. I can manually put in my stuff. But let's say we do AVX2, heavy, we'll do auto, 2 threads. We won't use automatic mode. Hit apply, hit start. This is going to start a test using Prime 95, AVX2, heavy, which is 4K to 1344. Runtime per core is automatic, suspends periodically, etc. To close the test out, while you're in this, this has to be in focus. Hold Control and hit C, and it terminates the script. Then you can just close out of the terminal window, and you're back to the settings. Just to show you that it's actually there and working, I'll run this again. Once it loads the script, right here, Prime 95, this is running, testing. So it is working. It's set to core 0. Cancel it. So you can use LinPack, then you would come to the LinPack tab. Choose your version you want. Choose your test mode. Choose your memory. Hit apply and start. A64. This program is not included in CoreCycler. You have to download the portable engineer version and put it in the folder. So it would go under test programs. ADA64. Here's a thing you can read for instructions right here. Y cruncher. Oh well, here, ADA. If you do put ADA in here in the folder, you choose which tests you want to run. Use AVX, set your memory amount, hit apply, and then run it start. If you want to run Y cruncher, come to Y cruncher. So this Y cruncher tab kind of applies to Y cruncher and Y cruncher old. So if you want Y cruncher, you would select this. You would select your mode, select your test you want to run here, and then you would hit apply and start. If you're using Y cruncher, it'll only use these values. It won't pick up any of these. If you're using Y cruncher old, it won't pay attention to any of these. It'll only use these. Test duration, memory, just run it at default. This, I wouldn't mess with this, just leave that enabled. Your tools, this is a boost tester, so if you have like hardware info, you can run boost tester and it'll run a really light load on each core for a couple seconds. Running on core 0 right now, you should see 5012. And then it'll cycle to the next core. Now it's on core 1 and it'll see what boosts are going per core. Almost 5. So you got Zen timings here if you want to check your timings. This runs a script to enable Windows performance counters if you're having issues. Core Tuner X. This will run a script that brings up a notepad. This will show you your CPPC values of each core if you have it enabled on BIOS. It should be by default. APIC IDs, this will list your APIC IDs for each core. Update check, this checks the GitHub page if there's updates. Logging, you can change the name of the logging file, so like the tests that we ran are right here. They're in the log file. So it'll show you like a detailed description of everything. Like these are all the settings in the config file, but some of them don't apply, like this Y cruncher mode. None of this applied because we weren't using these settings. This is just what the config file. It's hard to explain, but you don't need none of this information really. Just read down here and it'll show you like what FFTs were tested. Or wait, I don't even think. Yeah, that's what it's going to test. But yeah, here. So what this setting does, CoreCycler, it starts a name. So if you want to change it, you can change it there, and then when you run a test, it'll show up as whatever you named it. But it'll include the date and time and the test mode and whatever after. Log level, you can increase the log level of the log files to show more information or less. Use Windows event, just leave these as is unless you're having trouble or whatever. You can mess around with. These are more debugging settings. I would leave these all as is. But yeah, that's about it. Basically all this is a GUI that edits this config file right here. This config file runs or CoreCycler, run CoreCycler, pulls the settings from the config, and then runs the script with the settings. So the GUI is basically just connected to this config.ini file, and is just setting all these test modes or settings as you change them in the GUI. So like number of threads, if I say I set this to 1 and hit apply, now if I close the config file and then reopen it, it should say 1. Wherever it went, yeah, number of threads 1. But yeah, that's how it works. So, and then if you find a config that you like that finds errors pretty quick for your processor or whatever, like I said, for me, I created this one. This is the one that works best for me. It's just using Y-Cruncher with SFTV4, and I just test it like for an hour each core. You can once you change your settings and whatnot, you can click Save Config, and oops. Whatever. That's the name. It'll include .ini at the end, even if you don't. I didn't mean to put .com, but whatever. So yeah, that's the gist of it.